please know that I know that many here already know a lot about what, climate science, policy. Some people know more than me about specific initiatives. My goal here is not to cover everything in greatest detail, but get us on the same page. There are some basic myths, according to me, about climate science or climate policy. And without naming every myth, I am trying to poke holes in those myths for all of us. Right? First, we'll start with science. All life depends on three thin layers of fresh water, topsoil, and atmosphere. We're going to focus on atmosphere, but I like to point out that people think space is endless, so atmosphere must be endless. But if Earth were an apple, our atmosphere is 1/3 the apple skin. It's really in that very thin layer that we are building up these climate pollutants or greenhouse gases. In a given place, topsoil is 2 to 8 inches, but we will not talk about that today. And fresh water, David Loy gave me this figure. The fresh water on your screen is not the biggest blue circle there, but the tinier one, the middle one. That's all the fresh water, including that in ice caps. The bigger blue circle there is all the water, including ocean. So we have very precious 3 thin layers on which all life depends. And we are going to talk only about atmosphere today. Atmosphere, when greenhouse gases build up in our atmosphere, they act like blankets. So sunlight comes in and 3 things can happen to the sunlight. The sunlight can get deflected. Just the outer atmosphere can reflect the light back, or the light can get reflected from Earth's surface. But greenhouse gas effect is when these gases act like blankets and keep the heat in, right? So blankets over Earth is a good analogy if you want to explain greenhouse gas effect to anyone. This is one of the most important graphs I can show you. There will be a lot of graphs. So what you are seeing here is on the x-axis, horizontal axis, is time 0 is where we are today. And then it goes back into the history 800,000 years ago. And on the y-axis, the vertical axis, is carbon dioxide concentration. I like to call this Mother Earth's EKG. For 800,000 years, carbon dioxide concentration was between 180 and 280. Yeah? It just kept cycling between those two numbers, 180, 280, 180, 280. I'm not going to get into why that has been the case, but that's the natural rhythm. That has been the natural rhythm. Human beings evolved between 200 and 100,000 years ago. We as a species have never seen the extent of carbon dioxide we have on our planet today. You can see that red circle, right? So this is carbon dioxide concentration, 415 ppm, January 1st, 2020. So if this is our Earth's EKG, you can imagine how wrong things are. Okay. So because this gas is building up on our planet and the blankets are getting added to our planet is heating up at a rate that we don't experience from day to day. We are adding heat of 4 atomic bombs per second. It's a giant number. It's hard to wrap our heads around it. But we have built up 3 billion Hiroshima bombs worth of heat in our planetary system. I can't wrap my head around this fact. Okay, most of this heat has been going into our oceans until now, but our ocean is falling apart. Ocean is losing its capacity to absorb carbon dioxide. So because of all this heat accumulating in our Earth system, the direct result of that is that temperature is rising. Okay? And heat is rising, there are more droughts and fires. This is an easy connection. You build up these blankets on Earth, in Earth's atmosphere, and the temperature rises. The photograph here is from California, Malibu fires, I believe 2 years ago. The indirect result, this is very crucial, is that, and this is the reason I don't ever like to use the word global warming. I urge everyone to stop using the word global warming because warming feels nice and fuzzy. Yeah? What we are doing is putting our weather on steroids. This is a climate crisis or emergency. Because of this excessive heat in our system, planetary system, instead of air molecules, if you can see my face, instead of molecules moving like this, they move like this. You see? Everything is agitated. There is more heat in the system, there is more moisture in the system, and there are more powerful storms, hurricanes, and so on. This is a myth that I want to clarify in the next slide. Every weather event is impacted by climate change. But it is wrong to say that climate crisis caused any particular hurricane or storm. What I mean is that something was supposed to happen anyway. Climate crisis just makes it go on steroids. The intensity of everything is higher. It's not true that a particular storm is caused by climate change. It's always made more extreme by climate change. Okay?
Kriti?
Yes.
Quick question. Somebody asked, the really disturbing Hiroshima bomb figure. Does any of that heat end up dissipating?
It does dissipate over time, but it's accumulating. The steady state means that it's accumulating. In a healthy ecosystem, whatever heat builds up in our atmosphere gets released, right? So there is a steady state, heat coming in and heat going out. But this heat, this is the net heat accumulated. This is, so very good question, but this is the net impact. So another good definition that might be helpful is, what is this 1.5 or 2 degree goal that's mentioned in climate talks or climate agreements? Island nations across the world, they say we need to stay within 1.5 degrees Celsius so we can stay alive. What does that mean? You might not be able to read at the bottom of the slide, but we compare, Earth has a mean temperature of around 15 degrees Celsius. It's the mean of Earth's surface air temperature. So when we talk about these 2 degree goals, we look at Earth's global mean temperature between 1750 and 1900. Different scientists, different groups like to use different baseline, but it doesn't make too much difference. So we think of that as our baseline, and we are trying to measure how much different we are from that baseline, right? So if you look at this graph, the period between 1750 and 1900 was our zero. And so we are measuring change in degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit. And 1 degree Celsius is 1.8 Fahrenheit if you want conversion. But scientists all over the world use degrees Celsius. So as compared to 1900, we have already heated up our Earth's temperature to 1 degree Celsius by 2020. Okay, you can see this red circle here. That's where we are right now, around 2020. The Earth has already heated up by 1 degree Celsius on an average. That doesn't mean that India is also heated up by 1 degree Celsius. Indian roads are, last few summers, Indian roads have been melting, right? The temperature is high by 6, 7, 10, 15, sometimes 15 degree Fahrenheit. Okay, so the goal of 1.5 or 2 degrees, this is a goal set by not scientist, but an economist said 2 degrees should be reasonable goal. Right? For scientists, if you were to put us in a room, we'd say 1 degree is already too much. And now that's what we are aiming for. And island nations are saying, no, we will be drowned. We need to stay within 1.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, so the blue lines on this screen, blue lines is our safe territory where we should be. By the end of this century, by 2100, we should, if we really try very hard, we should stay there. Hopefully we'll stay there. But our current trajectory is basically the worst scenario, the red zone. Okay? Any questions here? This kind of graph will keep coming up, so it's important that we are on the same page here. All right. So another thing to notice, if you want to follow up climate news closely, is that climate crisis is not caused by carbon dioxide alone. In other words, there are many different kinds of blankets in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide from burning coal or gas is just one cause. There is carbon dioxide coming because we cut down the forests, or we lose the carbon in the soil, or there are these two gases called methane or nitrous oxide. They are here in symbolic forms in this pie chart, but when we add all of these gases, how do we count their climate impact? We've come up with this notation called carbon dioxide equivalence, CO2e. Okay, I'll show you what that means. So in this next graph, you are seeing different years on the horizontal x-axis. Year 2000, 2020, it goes on till 2100. And on the y vertical axis, this is, if you see here, it says gigatons carbon dioxide equivalence. This equivalence includes all other gases. It includes the net climate impact of all greenhouse gases. Okay, so now here on the bottom, you see if we human beings have to have a stable planet, we need to stay within 1.5 or 2 degree Celsius pathways on the bottom. Yeah. The current pledges that we have through Paris Agreement, the international treaty, is going nowhere close to where we need to be. And there is, of course, no monitoring of if anyone is going to meet those pledges. And if we don't have any climate policies, this is actually much less. We actually don't know what can happen if we cross 3 or 4 degrees Celsius change. We get into these feedback loops where a lot more carbon can be released from Earth. So what do I mean by that? In Australia, there were fires recently. Within 2 or 3 weeks, Australia released more carbon than it releases in a whole year. Because when forest burns, soil burns, trees burn, they release the carbon. And that's like a feedback loop no scientist could have predicted. When we predict emissions, we just look at normal, maybe a few small fires, coal power plants, and whatever else we release from transportation and food.
Kriti, let's see. Somebody asked, I think it might have been about the previous slide, what are F gases?
F gases are, you can think of them as refrigerants. So when we turn on air conditioner, there are these chlorofluorocarbons, and these are trace gases that are used in industry, but they have very high global warming potential. Like one molecule of such gases can be thousands of times more capable of capturing heat than one molecule of carbon dioxide. We end up focusing in climate policy realm on carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, which is produced when we fertilize our soils, right? You add urea, only 40% of urea will go into a plant. The rest goes into atmosphere. It becomes a gas, which is a greenhouse gas. I'm gonna keep moving now, but this is a very important graph. So another thing I want to point out in this graph, this place where you see this red dashed circle, see, we are in 2020 now, right? If we have to have a stable climate by 2030 or 2040, each of us needs to reduce our carbon footprint. Well, let me first say this. You can unmute yourself for this, so it feels interactive to me. Can anyone tell me how much is our carbon footprint today? Average American. How much carbon dioxide do we individually produce per year? Kilograms, tons, like take a guess. I'll give you all an answer. Answer is, I would say 30 tons, 30,000 kilograms. You can multiply that by 2.2 to convert it into pounds. Okay, so each of us are producing 65,000 pounds of carbon dioxide because of our lifestyle. And you know where that numbers needs to go for us to have a stable planet? That number needs to be 2,000 kilograms. So that is 4,400 pounds instead of 60,000 pounds, 65,000 pounds. We need to come down to 4,400 pounds per year, per person. Do you see that challenge? I will say much more about it going forward. Okay, so what do we need to do to make that goal? We need to keep it in the ground. By keep it in the ground, we mean let's not allow anyone to take out any more coal, oil, or gas. Keep it in the ground and add it to the ground. Add it to the ground, I mean carbon which is in the air. Plant more trees, get our soils healthy, and put carbon into the ground. We cannot allow any more fossil fuels to be dug out, any new coal, oil, or gas infrastructure. Okay. These are not my words, by the way. It comes from a very famous essay on climate crisis. I can give you references. And we need to really put high amounts of restrictions on transport. We have to let go of meat industry, at least the cruel way in which it exists today. We need to invest in local soils and plant-based food and communal village life. For a moment, let me take a pause here and see if there are any science questions, because I'm moving to impacts now.
There was something a ways back. I think you were talking about the graphs where we were heading for disaster and goals of where our something along the lines of in order to stay alive. And it just, so there was a question about, what does that mean? Because obviously there's many people in the world who aren't managing to stay alive already.
Yes, agreed. I guess there are different, yes, many people are already struggling, and we will get into that in a second. There is one place where we make ourselves and other species go extinct. That's one thing. Then there is utter chaos and catastrophe. We are already seeing catastrophic events, but really large-scale catastrophe where there is so much heat and water shut down that nuclear power plants melt, or there is crop failure in North America or Europe, right? You can imagine such big catastrophes, which even if the species doesn't go extinct, life is harder and harder, very hard, right? And we will have 200 million refugees and so on, if we don't have these climate policies. So I was not talking extinction. I was talking what will it take to avoid catastrophe of that massive level. People are already living in catastrophic conditions around the world. But I was talking about catastrophe, I suppose, in the privileged world that we live in.
Looks like there's a couple other questions too. If you could, somebody asked if you could back up to the slide with that list of things that, the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. I mean, in some ways, I want to do this conversation about personal footprints versus systemic change very carefully, because they are both very important, but I want to set a context for them. This is a well in the state of Gujarat, where Indian current Prime Minister comes from. And you can see it's mostly women who have to walk hours to get water. A city of 10 million in India last year completely ran out of drinking water. And I am personally afraid of just extreme violence because there isn't water. This isn't just caused only by climate change, but climate change exacerbates water availability. Africa, which has contributed the least to climate change, suffers from record droughts and food shortages that don't make the news. This is an image that still breaks my heart every time I see it. This is a Dalit man in India. He was cast, shamed, and his wife was refused water So they had to dig their own well. So it's the caste system in India is horrible, similar to slavery in the United States. But his well happens to be open to all. But the point I'm making here is what was raised earlier. People are already facing existential crisis. And we in the privileged world are afraid to get there. We don't want to be the ones facing so much water crisis. The refugee crisis from Syria, I will not read everything on this slide, but the Syrian conflict was fueled by 5 years of drought, and we are still reeling with the consequences. On this slide, the only thing I want to point out right now is, you see this very beautiful white structure on the bottom left. These are sea butterflies called pteropods, sea butterflies. And as our oceans are collecting more heat, our oceans are becoming more acidic because carbon dioxide is dissolving in the ocean. These little butterflies are losing their skin. Their shells are dissolving. And I just love them. You can watch their videos and just enjoy the wonder they represent. And I grieve that they are losing. They are in a losing battle. This is an image from BP oil spill. I will let the picture speak. We have all seen the news. Birds are vanishing from North America, and we don't talk much about insects, but insects are and bees are vanishing. Once again, not just because of climate, but pesticides have a huge role to play. But altogether, we are responsible for 1 million plant and animal species on the verge of extinction. So, is it too late, right? And are we doomed? Are we headed towards extinction? And this is a technical slide, but let me explain, and then you can read the words here. There are some people who say that we have crossed the tipping point. It's already too late. All we need to do is to prepare for planet dying or species becoming extinct. And what I want to say is, wait, there is not just a single tipping point. Our climate system, our planetary system has multiple tipping points. And this complex image here, which we do not have to understand fully right now, I'm happy to sit down with everyone and go over these one by one. But we have multiple tipping points. So what do I mean by a tipping point? Amazon rainforest is like lung of earth. Amazon rainforest fixes a lot of carbon, organic matter, and it produces oxygen. That's a vital ecosystem. If it crashes, it will have impact on the whole planet. So that's a tipping point. When Arctic ice stops existing, right? So on the top of this figure here, you see Arctic sea ice. On the top, Arctic sea ice, when the Arctic sea ice completely melts, North Pole will become open and the ships can go there, and some people are celebrating that they'll be able to move quickly between continents. Arctic sea ice is a tipping point. Similarly, Antarctic on the South Pole is a tipping point. When that Antarctic melts, not only it adds a lot of water to oceans and raises sea level, the fundamental functioning of the planet, that changes. Okay, so there are just a number of tipping points which impact all of us and make life possible on Earth if they are stable. What I am saying is that we have only crossed a few tipping points right now. There is a lot more that we can protect and fight for. We cannot allow ourselves to think because Arctic sea ice tipping point is crossed, there is nothing much we can do right now. It is true that Arctic is going to be completely ice-free in next 5 to 10 years. That tipping point is crossed. No North Pole. There's no place for Santa Claus. It is going to be gone no matter what we do today. It's crossed. But there is a lot more that we have to, can, and should fight for.
Kriti?
Yes.
Just and that kind of the overall question, are we headed for extinction? Just clarifying, who is we? Human beings, all beings?
Well, all other beings are already facing extinction and have gone extinct. There are a number of databases that maintain how many species have gone extinct in the last few years and who are on the verge of extinction. So when I say extinction, I'm talking human extinction, right? And of course, there is a spectrum. We will not immediately hit extinction of all, unless all of the frozen methane, there is a thing here called methane clathrates. If you can see my cursor moving on the right top, methane clathrates. If they really melt, human beings are extinct, right? And that is a worry that you might have seen. There are some videos around on the internet that talk about methane clathrates loosening up and they are beginning to thaw and things like that. Methane clathrate is not the same thing as frozen carbon, which is called permafrost. So permafrost is already melting, but methane clathrates is where you go into the territory of human extinction. And most scientists would tell you we are not there yet. We definitely have a lot of time before those methane clathrates will go out. That's the mainstream view. There are always scientists who will say, oh, methane clathrates are already in danger. But my personal feeling is that permafrost is melting, methane clathrates are not, in a generalized statement. Did I answer your question, Domya? Okay. All right, so is it too late? According to my studied opinion, no, we have crossed some tipping points. Mother Earth's lungs and heart are hurting, but there is a lot we can fight for, and we must create what I like to call islands of sanity, no matter what. Even if chaos hits us, we cannot save all ecosystems and all species everywhere on the planet. We must create islands of sanity. And I'll talk about what I mean by islands of sanity. Is a crucial question. I can't remember where that slide exactly is, but science is clear. I believe technology is here. We know what needs to be done. The question, the place where we get stuck, we say it's politics, but in the end, it is about who will pay for implementing the solutions that already exist. Planting trees doesn't take fancy technology. It takes money and resources and actually water to keep trees alive, right? The biggest problem with all the tree planting initiatives across the world is that you plant the seedlings and they die because they weren't watered consistently. And bringing water to where trees and saplings are takes money, resources, and human volunteers. So who should pay for implementing the solutions? This is a place where international talks get stuck. This is the place where politics comes into play and people say China and India and Brazil are creating obstacles. So should our kids pay for it? Our kids are already in the streets saying, don't ask us to focus on our homework, right? The teacher fish is yelling, concentrate on your math homework. And the little fishy is saying, there is a crack in the bowl. The kids can't pay for it. There is a very good article that I love, which says, millennials are facing the scariest financial future of any generation. They don't have full-time jobs. They can't afford to own homes. And they are not the ones who are gonna pay for to get us out of the climate mess. You say, okay, which country should pay for the climate mitigation or adaptation, for reducing the emissions, for planting trees? This graph here shows you emissions just of carbon dioxide, and different countries are lined up here. The solid bars in blue is where the emissions were in 2010. And the gray bar on the top is where the emissions are expected to go in 2030. Okay. So China is currently right here around 7,500, but it will have close to 16,000 million tons of carbon dioxide. So if you look at this graph, India is number 4, United States is number 2. You say, oh, China is the culprit, aren't it? China should be paying for this. Well, I want to show you 2 things. Quickly here, if food waste around the world was a country, food waste, that would be somewhere between European and American emissions as a country. We waste so much food that their climate impact is equivalent to that of all of European Union, including Great Britain. And if we were to look at the complete food system, including the deforestation food causes, that's in some ways higher than China's current impact as a country. So food embeds a lot of climate emissions. We will come back to that later, but let's talk about countries. This graph is showing us cumulative emissions, okay? So China, look at China here, number 2 from the top. China's contribution, even though it's quite high for a given year right now, if you look at this pie here, it's very thin compared to the contribution of United States here in blue or teal color here, right? So I'm talking about historical emissions here, and European Union. India is number 4 right now, but in terms of cumulative emissions, it's a tiny sliver here. Yeah, okay. That's number 1. Number 2, this is personal footprint. This data is slightly old, but you can see that United States per person. So my footprint, if I were to add up all of my international travel that I do for my work with farmers, paradoxically, I would probably be 30-40 tons, 40,000 kilograms, which I did the conversion earlier, 65, 70, 75,000 pounds every year. If you look at per person footprint of someone in India or China, they are down here in green. See, even if China or India as a country are number 1 or number 4 right now, the per person emissions are very low because of the lifestyle there. And I pointed this out earlier that for us to avoid climate catastrophe, not extinction, climate catastrophe, we all have to get down to this level in the next 10 years. When people say we have only 10 years left to save the planet, that is what they mean. It's not that world is going to end in 10 years if we don't decrease our emissions by this much. What they mean is that for us to have a safe pathway, sane pathway out of climate catastrophe, not extinction, we need to drastically reduce our per person emissions or country-wise emissions. I'm going to pause here because this is very important. A scale of the problem we face is a 60 billion ton problem. Okay, the total emissions today, global emissions, are 60 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year. Per person, even if I were living a lavish lifestyle, is 60 tons. So the reason we need to do both personal footprint and systemic work is that if we don't do systemic work, Kriti can kill herself trying to reduce 60 tons of my emissions to 30 or 25 or 20, and the fossil fuel companies and other systemic issues still keep happening. My 60 tons is not gonna get noticed by Mama Earth. The planet Earth needs solutions which are at the level of billions of tons. So we need systemic work. Having said that, we cannot ignore our personal footprint, but we need to do it as a community. If Domyo and Kriti are only working as individuals to lower our footprint of 60 to 2 tons per year, we can live as an ascetic and perhaps make it possible in this lifetime, but we need to do it as communities because we can't possibly reduce our footprint that much in America, where we need basic amount of heating and some, you need some heating to live in the latitude we live in. You will need some plant food, and I'll get to food. You need some basic transport. But if we are to do it collectively, we have a communal village life, Sangha life, we could be creating islands of sanity. Let me pause here.
Kriti, a interesting question that came up in terms of the 4,400 pounds per person would be kind of a sustainable yearly emission. And somebody asked, are there societies right now where that is people's footprint?
India is there right now. On an average, an Indian has that much number. We could get confused with the units here. This is in tons. 1 ton is 1,000 kilograms. That's 2,200 pounds. So India is there right now. An average Indian lives the lifestyle we all need to be living to avoid climate catastrophe. But India is in a different latitude. Most of India is warmer throughout the year, right? But we still have a lot to learn from India. The size of our houses, the way our suburbia is in place, the way how much meat we eat and how much transport we need, that all needs to change drastically.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Can I move on?
Good for now.
Okay. So going back to the question of who will pay for the changes that are required. This is another graph which is not looking at countries, but is looking by emissions based on wealth. The top 10%, as you might expect, the wealthiest 10% produce 50% of greenhouse gas emissions. And the poorest 50% only produce 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. So here is my fundamental thing that I am so passionate about. I will go through these points. People living in India, people living in poor parts of America, they have caused the least harm. I will let us read the cartoon first. So middle class, upper middle class people, including most of us here, we want everyone to think about climate change. And we tell people, come and join our march. And poor people, lower castes, or Black and brown people around the world who are saying, we've been marching forever. These people, this is the Black and brown, yellow, pink people around the world who are not of European descent, right? Not white. They have caused least harm. They will suffer the most because of climate change. They are suffering right now. And as we were just discussing in the previous slide, they have teachings that we need to face the catastrophe or avoid the catastrophe. We need humility. We think that some fancy technology will save us from ourselves. I do not believe so. We need to learn to be in solidarity and to humbly learn from people who know how to live without electricity. I was in New Jersey area when Sandy hit New York in 2012. We didn't have power for 12 days in our house. I called my mother and aunt in India to ask them, how do I survive? They don't just have practical tricks to tell me, they have psychological, spiritual resilience. They can sing through the night when there is no electricity. These are the people whose bodies, religion, culture, and resources have been subjugated to create financial wealth in the West. And when it comes to decision-making in the mainstream environmental movement, these people are a side dish. They don't get to take decisions in mainstream environmental organizations. And these are the people who have asked for financial reparations. It's not a topic that I will get into now, but I think we cannot have climate healing, climate justice, climate sanity without paying attention to this reality. Climate crisis doesn't exist outside of racial injustices. They are one and the same in my view. Okay, next. So where can and will we go from here? I'm gonna just look at the state of climate movement. In the last year, bright and beautiful young people, Greta included, Extinction Rebellion, and Sunrise Movement, they have really created a wave, right? In some way. Here is the graph, which is encouraging to see. You look at how many people have marched on streets since 2005, and the number was very small in 2005, 2014, 15, less than 1 million people. And in the last year, there were a total of more than 7 million people on the streets in a single week, school strikes. Okay, so there is a momentum that young people are leading. Then there is Extinction Rebellion and some of these actions that people here have been involved in, including Domio. But the challenge is that in spite of these encouraging signs, we are not just being asked to do something hard. What we need to do is actually impossible in some ways. If you think about the scale, that's a quote from Greta. We all need to do the seemingly impossible. And it is complicated. I'll let everyone read this quote. When you are dealing with a population that's trying to save today's world urgently, they are not recognizing that there is a problem with the world they are trying to save. They're actually trying to save dystopia. This is a quote from a very famous professor at Michigan State University who happens to have indigenous lineage. I'll just leave it here. The point that I want to make here is that even if there was a magical technology, there is talk about geoengineering and putting artificial clouds in the atmosphere so that you deflect the sunlight back. Even if there was a miraculous technology suddenly in front of us, there is something very weird about what we are trying to save. It's just something to keep in mind, and we can come back to this later. In my my feeling, looking and thinking about this, and given the scale of changes we want to make, I've proposed this in my emails before, that we need 3 pillars of climate action. There is going to be chaos, if not catastrophe, no matter what. We might not have large-scale problems with European American agriculture so that billions are starving, but we will still need a lot of trauma resilience. So we need, I think, and our sanghas can really serve in that way. Number 2, we need communal village living, which says strategic yes to how to live the life that will take us to 4,400 pounds of carbon dioxide per year. Or actually, it needs to become 0 over time. That 4,400 goal is only for next 10 years. After that, we need to get to 0. And then number 3, resistance. We do need to resist the entrenched interests who want to keep digging out more coal, more oil, more fracked gas. They need to hear no. But in some ways, communities coming together can do both. It's very hard for one-to-one level of psychotherapy to ever bring us to that level of trauma resilience where we need to be. And there were more details about this that I've covered in my email, but I just leave it here and quickly show you 2 more slides and I'm really done. This is about food impacts. Probably everyone can see what I'm trying to say here. Do you see nuts and peas and soy milk are at the bottom? It's undoubtedly true that non-vegetarian diet has way more climate impact. The units here, this is kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents. So this chart includes emissions due to cutting down of forests, deforestation, what is actually produced in a farm, what it takes to process meat, transport, bring it to our stores, and packaging. It includes all the impacts embedded in any food product. Okay, and this actually just came out in January, and when this came out, there was a lot of opposition from people who say we can grow beef sustainably. There is a way in which you allow herds to move, and there can be sustainable beef. And that might be true. That might be true. So the same set of people who produced this graph produced another graph that I'm going to go to next. This shows you all the ranges with beef. So this is showing you the units are slightly different. This is emissions per unit protein, per gram of protein. And in this graph, you can see that beef emissions can sometimes be very low, and it just covers the entire spectrum. So someone can say, well, if I eat beef, then there is a kind of beef locally produced with pasture lands, grass-fed cows, and so on, and my emissions would really be possibly be low. I wanted to show this slide to show that, yes, not all beef is same. Not all beef is causing same amount of climate damage. But the kind of meat most of us have access to, that has way more climate impact than any of the vegetable and nuts will ever have. And if we continue to eat non-vegetarian diet, let's put a number 10 there, okay? Let's say we have beef and lamb, pork in our diet, and it's an average of 10 kilograms of carbon dioxide per gram of protein. I did a calculation that to get our healthy dose of protein that we need in a day and multiply that by, number of days in a year, you go up to 3 tons, which is 6,600 pounds per year just from protein in your food. The point I'm trying to make is I do not think that eating meat can be, like, even if you had the best quality beef coming from local grass-fed cows, it can never be climate friendly. We do need to drastically reduce, if not completely become vegans or vegetarians. I'm not going to spend time talking about my influences. I just want to say, if you need more information about what we are able to offer, they are on our website. Thank you so much for your attention. And I'm going to give it back to Domio and have some discussion. Thank you for listening.
Greetings from Sydney. It's flooding here today. The fires are down by 2/3, and some of the biggest ones are out. I'm wondering whether there are any planning models that take into account intranational or international sustainability sustainably modeled life. And I'm asking because of the huge variation in lifestyles that there are in India and China, and the kind of aspirational quality of the American and European way of life with all of its carbon footprints. What, if any, work has been done to sustainably model intranational and international living in an agreeable and sustainable way for larger populations than villages?
Thank you for that question. So glad you could join from Australia. It's been heartbreaking what has happened there. I am not aware of research efforts in that direction. I can tell you what my feeling is right now from hearing from my colleagues and friends. I think we are still struggling to make the leap of where we really need to go. I'll give you an example. People are very excited about Tesla or all these battery, we all have our Priuses or Leafs. A single car, even if it's completely electric and has good battery power, the construction of the car itself is equivalent to 30 tons of emissions. It takes so much energy to build electric cars, let alone all the fancy alloys and metals and semiconductors that need to go and require mining. My point is that in some ways, this is new for me just in the last month. I do not think that cities are sustainable. We need to go back to some kind of sustainable, healthy village life, which does not rely on so much trade. I myself have been shocked that I hadn't given it so much thought that how much we need to reduce our emissions. We say we are still talking about electric cars and solar subsidies, but none of those subsidies, and if everyone in this country had an electric car, we still won't meet our goals. So what are we gonna do? The extent of change required is drastic, and I don't think any organization has wrapped its head honestly into that fact. Oh, somehow it will all fall in place in an incremental, small, short way.
Yeah, not likely, because these countries have developed in reliance on huge systems of roads and trains and planes that are the food and in some cases the water suppliers. So yeah, this is almost an impossible modeling problem, but without some way of understanding what that would look like. I don't know if we have the resources, even as spiritual teachers, to create islands of sanity, because the systems on which they rely will not stand up with the kind of change that you're describing. Most of the places that people live depend on trade and might not or are very highly likely not to be able to survive if they don't have that.
I'll just add a fact here. I'm trying not to tap into my heart right now because it's emotional for me. Any city doesn't have more than 3 days of its living supplies, food.
Yeah.
And that is such a big problem. Politician is going to come and say no trade. To not have climate catastrophe, let's limit our trade. And for me, no amount of carbon tax or carbon prices, I'm looking at Grant here because he's such an expert on this, important, but the extent of changes needed go way beyond what carbon tax can do for us. That's my feeling.
Well, that's true, because carbon tax, the whole system of carbon tax depends on sustainable systems to support it.
So Tenku, you are unmuted.
Thank you, Kriti. That was wonderful. So I've been trying to work on modeling what a good response would be for us as in teachers in terms of the climate crisis, and modeling in what we can do in terms of creating communities. And this is a very open-ended question, but I guess I really want to put this out there. It's something I'd like to work on. And exactly the things that you've mentioned are the things that I've been working on. Trauma resistance, communal life, and resistance overall. And if I had to say, those exactly fit into my ideals with not only everything that I am doing personally in my teaching, but in my role as SCBA president, that really fits in nicely. So I'm very interested in looking to create a model that we can offer as a gift to the next generation. And that model would take, of course, funding. And what can legacy funding look like from the generation that is still quite large, but will soon be retiring and, you know, eventually be leaving the world? What can we offer to the millennials, to the Gen Z? And what would that look like? And if we can start to really design that with some intention and to put some funding underneath it. So that's where I am right now. And I guess I want to call for action around that. And I also want to really highlight the intersection of race. It's something that we've started dealing with, but I really feel strongly we're not leaning into that hard enough. And refugees, climate refugees. So, you know, I think we're going to have a lot more of those. And is there a way that in creating our communities, we can also include, you know, a housing for refugees? You know, it's something where a lot of our churches are already doing in housing people who are fleeing from ICE, who are originally climate refugees. So these are the things that I'm really interested in and want to develop more. And I feel like we know this. This is our Zen model from Asia. And I don't know how much we've imported that to the West. You know, we know this ideal and we might have experienced it, each of us, for a little bit of time, where we grew our own food, where we lived very simply, where we limited our electricity and our, you know, our carbon footprint. But I don't feel like we're living that right now. So I guess I don't know that there's a specific answer, but this is a call for help in creating this type of model as something, again, as a gift to the next generation. It's not something that I think I will be able to benefit from in my lifetime.
Thank you. This is much needed. All I will say is that we probably need another conversation to unpack this. These are exactly the kind of models I am working on. This I sent that link to maybe some of you have seen it. I'm working on this yet to be named network. We call it the Spiritually Based Direct Action Network for Racial Healing and Climate Justice. And I would really love it if you all gave it a reading, just a little booklet that is associated with that. And I would love to discuss that model, and maybe there are other models on how we can create these islands of sanity, how we can leave the template there. I think that we're gonna hit chaos, if not catastrophe. But if we can leave interconnected islands of sanity around, the future generations will have best of our values, practices, techniques protected somewhere. It's like the seed bank of good values, good practices, resistance, trauma healing, communal living. So,
Kriti, thank you so much. I want to be part of that conversation about islands of sanity. I have been making an effort here in Minnesota for quite some time, and people have visited with whom I thought we could make that community. We could make the community that grew food and took care of the land and participated in resistance. But most of those have been younger people, and they went on.
This is hard, Shodo. I myself need to learn from people like you. As a scientist, I operate in this world, which is not what we need. And I'm trying to put together a land project here. It's very hard work, but it can be joy if we do it together. I have seen such happy young people enjoying that communal village life where we need to go. But young people need experiences of people like us, one for emotional resilience, because these young people burn out. There's like a mismatch going on. You know, we are wondering what can Zen teachers do? And there are young people hungry for
Right.
guidance in some ways, but their language and patterning is different, and we are not connecting. We have so much to learn from them, and we have some to offer, but there is mismatch going on, and we can't wait around for them to show up in our Zendos, is my view. We have to go where they are, learn their language, and then in the process learn from each other. That's where I have been spending more and more of my time. Just show up where young people who are doing courageous things already.
I would like to ask Kriti whether, I don't know if this makes sense, but if there's a short message you could get out to all the Zen teachers in the country, what would it be? Because I'm conscious of the fact that you've been talking about this for quite a while, and only recently have we said, we'd like to hear more about that.
I think we do not understand the extent of crisis. Let's talk about climate in our sanghas. Let's please talk about climate in our sanghas. There might be a lot more creativity there buried between the grief. We are so scared to go there because there's so much happening. Presidential elections are coming. In this year, let's have all of our sanghas really talk about climate and bring in a climate scientist or two. I think there is so much alternative facts going on, and we cannot fight them all, but let's have a conversation on same page, get on the same page about the level of this crisis. And let's ask Sangha, what do we want to do? Because if people are rooted and grounded enough to sit through some facts, listen to some facts, then people will go back and think about it. It's like we don't even know grandma is sick, right? How would we even talk about healing? So I would say, let's talk about it and create a community around it.
Thank you, Kriti. I want to say how important it is for us to come together as a community. We're all busy in our own worlds, and this meeting is one that starts a conversation. Kriti and David Loy will be leading 13 of such conversations for the Shogaku Zen group, and any of you and your students can join in and just contact me or at shogakuzen.org, because an extended conversation will take us to a different level.
Okay.
Thank you, Grace. And there are other things happening, I'm sure. The whole Eco-Dharma Center here in Colorado, we have many things happening throughout between April and October, which might be of interest. One question is, what does Island of Sanity look like? There can be different models. There are eco-villages around the world. There are models in Asia and Africa, and we can talk about different models. And then within those models, what is truly sustainable? Asia has models, but they are highly sexist and patriarchal. So we don't want to import a bad model, even though it's sustainable in some regards. So what does an island of sanity look like in 21st century for us, right? And then what does it take to recreate it? And financial resources are just one resource. My belief is that we need way more than, financial resource is actually a smaller part. We probably want to rely more on human labor and human heart than finances.
Hey, Musham.
There you are.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating this discussion and the opportunity to be here. So thank you, Kriti, for inviting me. I'm not a Zen teacher. And I heard Kriti say very, very clearly in this presentation that climate justice equals racial justice, and that includes reparations. So I'm wondering, I thought it would be a good place, and we're ending, but to actually start these discussions with identifying what our demographics are, We started with 23 people on this Zoom. I'm seeing that possibly there are 2 Zen teachers who might self-identify as of Asian descent. I'm wondering if there are any Zen teachers here who self-identify as Black or of African descent, and any who self-identify as Latinx. And once we get those demographics, to ask ourselves, if indeed climate justice equals racial justice, what does that signify for what our responsibilities are for those of you who are Zen teachers within the people who actually come to your Zen centers or who are within your sphere of influence as students and colleagues in the United States?
Mushim, huge question, huge. And, the notion that I run into, so I'm Asian, I technically am a person of color, woman of color, but the problem I run into, and there is resistance in my white friends, people think we are talking about identity politics when it actually is, how do we take care of trauma, right? Racial trauma. It's not about identity politics, it's about trauma, and we are here to take care of trauma, heal, and transform. So it's definitely a question we need to pay attention to, and I urge all of us to show up for that conversation because all of us are so needed. I feel isolated, alone in bringing up this issue. I feel marginalized when I talk about racial issues. And it's not that, I'm not saying that brown and Black people have all the answers, but they do carry a higher load of trauma, and they also have incredible wisdom that we all need collectively.
He says, I'm struck by the problem of facing the magnitude of what climate crisis represents. Facing dystopia is a hard sell. I'm interested in how we can come together to face the reality, the suffering before us. Maybe another session to talk about how our communities do this.
I go head on with grief. For the longest time, I wasn't allowing my own grief, and Joanna Macy has been so helpful. I trained with her and I do grief rituals now. And it releases the pressure that's building up in my own system from reading climate news. I must tell you that so many of my climate scientists have panic attacks at night. We cannot face the truth ourselves. And a lot of climate scientists are doing grief work now because to stay sane, to keep doing our job. We know the climate news 3 to 4, 5 years before it gets published. So, we know so much which is not public yet. And it's so hard. So head on meeting the grief, like without distracting.
Do you have grief rituals that you can link us to?
I could link you up. The recommendation is to do it with some people who do it. So there are a number of people in each city. I'm sure Portland has so many, Domio, where work that reconnects teachers. And there are also indigenous groups in different states who, and African, there's a lot of African ritual in US now, where people talk about, and grief is grief, personal grief, social justice issue related grief, climate grief. Body just sees grief. Body doesn't know this is climate grief and this. So body just needs to release that so that it doesn't become pathological and ongoing anxiety. I can send you links is the short answer.
I would just like to thank Mushim and Kriti, and I would really welcome our next conversation being around the intersection of racial equity and climate crisis.
All right.
Thank you so much, Domio and Jill, for holding the space for us.
Thank you for sharing with us and for all the work you're doing, Kriti.